You're live.
Welcome to the No Dice, No Glory Roundtable for the HMGS Cybercom. I'm your moderator, Phil Bolger, and I am joined today by Kevin and Sarah Verssen.
Hello.
Today, they're going to speak to you guys about what it's like to work at DVG, what it's like to come up in the industry, as well as what new does DVG have. Maybe we'll get into a little bit of the role of solitaire games and wargaming or any number of other fun things. I'm pretty excited. For anybody that is in the audience, please make sure you turn your camera off and mute your microphone. If you have a question, please type it in the chat, and myself, I'll go ahead and ask the speaker during the Q&A session. Now, with that, let's go ahead and have some introductions from our speakers.
Hello, I'm Sarah Verssen, and
I'm Kevin Verssen.
my husband.
Yeah,
and
my wife.
we work for DVG. For 5 years or so, and
Yeah,
Kevin since he was old enough to roll dice.
yeah, sitting on my mom's lap, she'd hand me dice to roll on the counter for her.
Yeah, so that's actually a great place to start. I don't think I know anybody else that literally grew up around the industry. That's really fascinating to me. Was it like having game designer parents? I mean, do they make you like roll to decide what's for dinner?
Okay, people are gonna think that we started that. We told you about that, but we didn't. Actually, it's really weird. We growing up, we just random. We didn't eat very many vegetables. We tended to have a lot of pasta or a lot of steak.
There's a point to this.
Yeah, and so
right.
for vegetables, we had like canned greens and canned corn, and it was then my parents realized, hey, let's expand out this a little bit. Let's get us some more, vegetables in the house, and so they got 6 different horrendous vegetables canned. Canned Brussels sprouts, canned spinach, canned beetroots and stuff like that. And they got 6 of them because they handed me or my sister a 6-sided die and had us roll for which horrendous vegetable we would have that night. And I don't know what the point of it was, but there was like some enthusiasm every time a die was rolled of you didn't get the Brussels sprouts, but we did get the canned spinach. So yeah, there was rolling for dinner, and people are going to think that I prompted you with that, but no, it's random.
You guys had an actual dinner results table. That's terrifying.
Yeah. Sometimes it's pasta with red sauce if it's, a 3 or less. Sometimes it's pasta with white sauce if it's a 4 or higher. It's, it was anything to incorporate games, statistics, and a little bit of chance and uncertainty was how we did dinners at the Verssen house.
And how old did this start?
I would say it started when I was about 5 years old. My sister Kira probably about 2 years old. When I was old enough to read the pips on the die and understand what that meant is when they started that process. And it was a little family bonding. 5 minutes before dinner, it's what can are we gonna plop out on the plate.
Wow, that's so from a very, very early age, you were taught to see the world through the lens of game mechanics. That's super fascinating to me. So at what point did they start bringing you into, we want you to come up with mechanics, or we want to hear what you think about games?
It started pretty early. The first time I was really involved with a game was when they were making Field Commander Rommel or Field Commander Alexander. And I was helping them read the rules, and they realized that my 5th grade reading level wasn't quite enough for the rule book, but what I could do was read it out loud, and that would help them realize where spots in the sentences or within the paragraph should be kind of consolidated or fixed up. But yeah, it was it then slowly progressed more and more of, I started getting into the packaging side of it, then I started getting into the play test side of it, to the development, then finally to the design.
Your first big development was Tiger Leader when you were 15 or 16, right?
Yeah. I was spent a lot of hours at the table moving the tanks around and seeing how it worked. And Dan and I would work together on that, and it was a fun experience, a good bonding experience, sitting at the table just scratching your head saying, I know something about this is wrong, but I don't know what about it is.
So that's super fascinating to me. Something that I hear about a lot from a lot of folks, and in fact, I talked a little bit about it yesterday, and I'll be hearing in the next hour from a very different angle about the same thing, of sort of how do you get into game design, how do you get into game development? And I got to be honest, being born into it is one that this is the only circumstance I'm aware of. I'm not saying there's not others; it's just very, very unique. But as somebody who did manage to get that sort of the same time most of us were learning anything ranging from ABCs to algebra, how would you encourage other folks to go along the same path, learning game design and game development?
It starts with just playing games, and I you play some games, you start realizing there are things that they made decisions on in the design that I would not have done or I would have done differently. And then you start realizing I could make my own game on a similar topic, except do it my own way. And that's sort of like the steps. And then once you like start making it yourself and you realize there's a reason they didn't do it this way, it opens up just a can of worms that you cannot, fix. So they kind of had the good idea there. But then you start thinking, what if I were to change the core formula and the design and the era and the subject matter? And like those just kind of snowball into creating your own design, because you don't want to make a design that somebody else made. You want to like kind of make your own thing, especially for your first design, because that way you'll feel like a sense of accomplishment for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a terrific lot of sense. So I personally am a big DVG fan. I play a lot of Warfighter. I've got I think all the eras you guys currently have out now and all the variants. So to me, when you start talking about looking at a game system, then how do you modify it? How do you change the era? How do you change the circumstances? That's immediately what came to mind. Would you mind talking through what led you guys from the original Warfighter as it came out as strictly a modern Special Forces tactics game to the sprawling family it has become now?
I think it really just comes down to popularity. People loved the first wave of Warfighter Modern. I think it was only 4 expansions in the core game, and people loved it so much. I think within like 6 months, we came out with Wave 2, which was 5 through 9, which was Footlocker. And then people said we wanted World War II, and we said, okay, we can do that. And then Shadow War and PMC and Vietnam, Fantasy, Vixen, all those coming up down the road. It's mostly because people asked for it, and we really want to give our fans what they want. So that's how we get a lot of our ideas now that we're more developed, is what do people ask for?
So that's a terrific bridge. One thing that I've noticed in my interactions with DVG, and full disclaimer, I have developed a battle pack for them. They have given me money, so I'm a little bit biased. But even prior to that, the entire way I got involved with battle pack development was simply interacting online. I've found that DVG is very, very active in their fan groups on Facebook. They're active in responding to emails. Would you guys tell us how much your day does that take up? It seems very exhausting.
That is majority of Sarah's day.
Yeah, it's basically turned into my whole job at this point, and most of Kevin's too. Like it's pretty much developed to overtaking. From where I started was just like 20 or 30 emails a day and packing out orders, and that would take 3 or 4 hours. And now I get dozens and dozens of emails an hour, and have notifications and tags all over Facebook. And Kevin's managing other projects with outside designers who we talked to in groups and joined in. That's how, like you said, Philip, you've joined us, and that's how we got Chuck on board and David Macon and so many others. It's just through communicating. And I would say we've had to like force ourselves to limit some of that communication because it was so much overtaking our job. So I'd say now, like, we try to limit Facebook to like 2 hours a day or less, like talking to people physically on Facebook. And then I answer my emails every day at work and try to get through all of them. And Kevin, I think at this point you spend like 5 to 10 hours a week on the phone with designers and getting things progressing. And it's a lot of our job. It's developed into a bigger and bigger chunk.
Yeah.
So with that, that's interesting you say that, because if you have to keep your time very, very focused, how do you determine when somebody's come to you with a good design or something for good potential versus somebody is just calling you up to ramble about one time I read a World War II?
That is, well, it's a really easy test of I see somebody post a couple of times on Facebook or in comments or whatever of either I really like that they did this or I really don't like that they did this. And I then, maybe comment on them back and forth, and something that you're very familiar with. And then I say, do you have an interest in making X product? Either that be a battle pack, a core game, a game in another series like a Field Commander or a Leader series. And the person almost always says, yes, yes, I'm so excited. And I said, great, send me some information about sort of the history about what you're thinking of doing, some of the research, and then we'll get talking. And I would say 90% of the time, that is the last message sent. As soon as you say,
give me work.
right, it's, I'm excited, you're excited, let's get this project going, let me know what you have. And sometimes they have it in their heads, sometimes they have to do research or whatever, but that's normally when it stops. The real gems are the people who then message back later and 2 days or 2 months later and say, all right, here's the general idea. And sometimes it's just chicken scratch, written on some notes. Sometimes it's like full MLA formatted, multi-page essays. And that's kind of when, and that's—
We're watching the people joining the group, and we think we know one of them, a couple of them.
And that's how I know that somebody's really interested in it. And that's kind of how we got going for your Tarawa Battle Pack.
Yeah, I not to hijack your conversation, but I would like to tell the audience about that. So basically, all that had happened is I had written excitedly about Warfighter on a couple of the forums. It was a game that, especially when I got the World War II Pacific Theater, I was just enamored with, because the Pacific is perennially undergamed. The parts of it that are gamed tend to be the naval battles. I would still like to see more Pacific air stuff, specifically China, Burma, India theater, but that is a gripe and complaint for a different time. I don't see Chuck in the comments, so that was my attempt to try to bring him in on that. But I was really excited when it came up to, hey, anything in the Pacific theater you could make. And I offered, well, what if we do Tarawa, but from the perspective of the defense? Because for me, I always think of Tarawa as one of the roughest days for the Marine Corps. They had to sort through, well, roughest 4 days. They had to sort through a lot of stuff in order to make that happen. But when you zoom out and look at it, they had 3 divisions worth of troops. The Japanese had a brigade minus. So I wanted to know, what would it be like to get in the head of those SNLF guys and figure, how are you really going to hold this against people that they've taken the sea, they've taken the air, and now they're going to take your land, but you're not going to give it to them? What does that mean? What does that entail? And reading up on it was super fascinating, but I was equally fascinated that the Verssens were willing to let me publish that. That's a bizarre niche. I'm not sure many people spend time thinking about that. So definitely, I thought that was nice. And if you're out there and you're an aspiring game designer and you've played Warfighter, you like infantry combat in World War II or special forces combat in modern, and you've got a weird idea, because there's a lot out there, it's worth reaching out, because it sounds like the biggest barrier is enthusiasm and willingness to put in the work.
Yeah. If you do have an idea and want to develop something, email me, customerservice@dvg.com. It's how we've gotten most of our coworkers at this point, is interest and enthusiasm. That's all it really takes to be a game designer.
It's a really, I would say it's very rewarding, because I enjoy putting time and effort learning the game and creating expansions for it, and then being able to see my name on that box and see people play that expansion and say, oh, this card really gives me a headache, or oh, this soldier's my favorite. And in my mind, I named this soldier after, like, a friend, or after a historical last name or whatever. It's just kind of, Smeltzer or whatever. But then when people say, Smeltzer, he was the best, he shot all the Nazis, it's like, he did that because I made Smeltzer, I made that card. And it's just kind of a fun feeling of like, people are enjoying something that I made.
Yeah, and that's something I'm experiencing a lot right now, because much like you, Philip, I had my first battle pack come out also. It's Battle of Kandahar, and I had no idea how people would react. I was really nervous and excited, and I've never designed anything before. And seeing my name, like Kevin said, seeing my name on the back of the box was like, ooh, I have my own like byline. That's me.
It is not a nice battle pack. It is you're going to have to earn it battle pack. But
It's rough.
those are the kinds I like buying, so it's not a problem for me.
Yeah, it's too easy. It's boring.
So that actually, that's a good segue into something for challenge. How do you determine the right level of challenge for a game you're making? Because DVG ranges from stuff that I can basically do in my sleep to, oh my God, is this even mathematically possible?
The challenge mostly comes from dozens to hundreds of hours, hundreds of thousands of hours of designing a core game and realizing this is what easy, medium, hard, and very hard difficulty are. Then you can take that, and when you want to make an expansion and you say, I want to make this expansion a medium difficulty, you like, it's weird to say, but you like feel what a medium difficulty is going to be because you've spent so much time around these numbers and these cards and all that. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Jack.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Howdy, Chuck.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries, Chuck. If you could, go ahead and kill the camera and the mic, but we'd love to hear from you in the comments. We've already started talking about CBI in the air. So.
And once you get a feeling for what a medium difficulty is, you can then create that. And you'll later be told 6-9 months later when your pack comes out, they said this was going to be medium. This is very hard. They are wrong. And then you come out, and you see what can be done about it. And you see, did you mess up and make it too difficult? Or was the player not utilizing all of their options and just played in a single play style that may not have been optimal for that encounter?
And at this point, especially with Warfighter, we have the hostiles in our mind and on the spreadsheets kind of ranked in order of difficulty. I think it goes kind of from jungle to
Eastern European
at this point and everything in between. And so when you're developing new hostiles for a new location, you say, okay, like where do I want to start? Like what difficulty range is a good place to jump into, and then kind of use those hostiles as a base to make yours. So if I want it between this difficulty and that difficulty, I'll use both to kind of modify my own until I get a middle ground of difficulty.
So a lot of it is just really feeling out where it is and trying to get to the sweet spot.
Yeah. And
so, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, when it comes to the battle pack, something I'm really happy about is the historical nature of them. Something that I've spent a lot of time talking with battle pack creators is we're making a Warfighter expansion, but we're also kind of making a history textbook. And so the names of the missions and the locations and the objectives and even the soldiers present, it would be great if they were the real names.
It should tell a story.
Right, and it should tell a historical story. So if you were to play Kandahar or Fallujah, and you play it through, and in Kandahar when everybody has a grenade and an RPG in their back pocket, and then you do research on it, and it's like, they did.
It's a dramatized version of what happened, just like movies and TV shows about history.
But it's like, it has historical basing, and it's not just they threw numbers on a card and called it a day.
So yeah, terrific. We've got a question from my co-host with NDNG, Mitch Reed. So he says, in his opinion, DVG leads the industry in developing solo games. Was this by design, or did you guys just find the games you started to develop happen to have great mechanics for solo play?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
I believe back when Dan started DVG, he happened to start with a solitaire game, and I think he was making solitaire games for other companies at the time, as well as some multiplayer games. But I think when it came to it, he enjoyed making solitaire games, and then we got known as the solitaire game company, and now we don't make games unless they can have a solitaire component, because that's what we're known for. Like Mitch said so kindly, it's like we kind of lead an industry with solitaire games, so now that's what we have to do. And it's fun, and at this point our games have lent themselves to being solitaire very easily.
Yeah, we tend to like 1+ games, so that way, like with Warfighter, you could play it solitaire, or you could play it with up to 5 other friends, and everybody's controlling their own squaddy and NPS, and there's the 1-player soldier trying to manage the chaos of everything. But yeah, we found that those 1+ games tend to sell best, because then the solitaire wargamers are fine, but also the social
bringing
groups.
Other people in. We're not alienating anyone else. But I got to call out David Thompson. He made a couple comments. Thank you for the kind compliments about my customer service. And yeah, working with him has been great with all of the solitaire games, and I appreciate that he wants to work with us.
Yeah, I'd like to read out his comment verbatim. So he says that when he was looking for a publisher for Pavlov's House, the first publisher he went to was DVG because he felt they were the best solo war game company. And it's worth noting, by the way, shout out for David, Pavlov's House and Running on the Same Engine Castle Itter are both terrific games. Especially Pavlov's House focuses on Stalingrad, and Castle Itter focuses on the self-described strangest battle of World War II, the time where Americans and Germans fought against other angrier Germans. I think there was some French resistance there. It's a terrific series. So let's pull on that thread a little bit. So how did you guys meet David? Did David come to you with a fully developed game? Did you guys talk to him?
I believe he was. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. I believe you were posting about it on Facebook in the Solitaire Wargame group, and I believe I commented on your post and said, "Hey, DVG's interested in your game," or maybe you emailed me first, but. I remember going to Dan and saying, there's this guy. He's finished the game. It's ready. We don't have to do anything. He just wants to make it. He needs someone to make it. And we do his type of game. We do solitaire war games. And Dan usually says to me at that point, well, let me see, like, prove to me it's like in the state to produce. Like, let me see rule books. Let me see videos. And so me and David emailed back and forth dozens of times. And then we published, and at this point, we absolutely adore working with David, and I think he enjoys working with us, as he said. And Castle Itter and Pavlov are the first two of the Valiant Defense series, is now what we're calling it. And there will be many more down the road, we sure hope. And I know there's one planned for this year that he's hinted at of soldiers in post-med uniform.
Yeah, that's about the invasion of Poland, if I recall correctly. There was a post office that fought the Germans.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I believe you'll have to talk with him about that.
I don't know enough about it yet, but we trust David so much.
Yeah, and it's fun actually working with David because he sends me over all of his files, and I know the mark of someone who's fun to work with, and that they respond to messages faster than I do. And he sends me
on top of things.
Yeah, he sends me all the details, all the information, all in a nice MLA style, bullet pointed. This is exactly what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, where it needs to happen. Right. And so I'm not just like figuring anything out. It's like a perfect rule book of laying it all out. And then I send it to him. And then he says, ooh, looks like we have an extra counter on this counter sheet. Do you know how? And sorry about that. We have one extra here. And then I remove it. But yeah, it's and he's also like nice to work with. He's a nice guy that we can talk with and stuff, and that always helps with communication.
Yeah, and being able to just send him someone emailed me a Castle Itter question. Do you mind answering it? He's always on top of that, always very helpful. So he's great to work with.
So you guys are saying that people skills might be necessary for wargaming? That's dangerous, man.
I know, in the solitaire wargame industry, you think people skills wouldn't matter too much, but they do.
Yeah.
So one thing that I would ask, so I have played a decent amount of DVG games. I got a good chunk of the leader games. I haven't gotten into Field Commander, and I'm absolutely obsessed with Warfighter. But what I would ask you guys is recommending to the audience, if somebody came to you and said, I got a friend, wants to get into wargaming, wants to get into solo wargaming, where should he start? What would you recommend?
Warfighter.
And then
I think Warfighter is what I would recommend. I know it's not like a traditional war game. But it's easy to, once you know what you're doing, you'll always know what you're doing. Even if you switch eras, there might be a few new rules, but it's pretty simple and straightforward, especially if you're willing to learn from someone who knows what they're doing. But that's what we use a lot when we would go to conventions and stuff to demo is Warfighter, because it's the most popular. There's a lot of options. There's something that'll interest everybody, and it's relatively simple to learn.
Yeah, I would argue Warfighter. What's really like interesting about gamers that I've come to realize as I've been in the industry longer and longer personally is gamers like certain wars or eras or countries or vehicles.
They have their niche.
And it's like, I was at a convention a few years back, and we were at a booth, Sarah and I, and we had all of our games out. A guy walked up to us, saw a Hornet leader, picked it up and said, do these have EA6B prowlers in them? And I said, yes. And he said, then I'll buy it. And I said, do you want to like know about the game? He said, nope, they have prowlers. My dad flew a prowler. That's all I want to know. And that's it. Like he was just, and it's just like, it's weird. And I've come to find that like for me, certain aircraft like P-38 Lightnings or M4 Shermans, I really like. And so a game that has those, I'm just naturally drawn to. So with Warfighter, we have almost every nation, modern and World War II. We have almost every battle that's happened. So someone that says, I love Bastogne, or Battle of the Bulge, it's great. We have an expansion for that. Or I want to see more from the Japanese side. Great, we have 5 expansions about that.
Or if we don't have it, you can make it.
Do you want to make it? And yeah, people get excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be entirely honest. That was so my introduction to to DVG as a whole. Warfighter was what really lit the spark, but the first game I ever bought was Thunderbolt Apache, strictly because it had the A-10 in it, which is like one of my all-time favorite aircraft.
Yeah.
So it's right there on the cover. It shows you, do you want to use the Hog's big gun against tanks? Absolutely, yes. That sounds like a great way to spend a Saturday. So it was an easy sale. And I asked the chat whether or not people ever had something, and I believe it was Chuck said he picked up Corsair and Phantom Leader based on what they had. And Pete Oakley offered that he was getting Sherman Leader and has Tiger for the same reason. We also have a question. Yeah. So Mitch asks, DVG uses Kickstarter for a lot of their games and reprints. Is this a model that you guys prefer and find a lot of benefit in?
Yeah, we tried just doing like through a pre-order system of like once we get 500 people to commit to buying this, then we print it. And we were finding it was too slow of a process. It didn't lend itself well to us making new designs and knowing like when to have something ready because people now have funded it. So Kickstarter has been a huge resource for us. It's the only way we make games at this point. We've looked into other crowdfundings, but Kickstarter seems to be the most popular and user-friendly at this point. There's a lot of benefit. It allows us to quickly see what the interest is in the subject, get the funding, create the game, or very quickly see that maybe there wasn't the interest we thought in this design, and maybe we'll revamp it for later, or maybe we'll drop it all together. It just depends.
One of the other big benefits of Kickstarter is if we're going to reprint a game, we can just reprint it, or if we go through Kickstarter, we can say, we're going to reprint the core game, and we're also going to create a couple of expansions and add-ons and neato things that we wanted to include in the core game initially, but we weren't able to, or through community effort, they've come up with things like new campaigns and new aircraft or vehicles that we can use. And that gets really exciting for us because then we've done this now a couple of times, especially with the Leader expansion Kickstarter that just finished. We knew we wanted to do some stuff for Phantom, Israeli, and Hornet, as well as B-17. And so I reached out to Dean Brown about this, and we were able to make an expansion that contains a lot of stuff. And now we have a reprint of the core game, as well as we have an expansion. So those that want to jump in can now jump in with 2 products, or those that already bought the game 5 years ago can now get an expansion that'll add more into their product.
It's allowing us to keep things in stock better. A problem we were running into a few years ago is just something would run out of stock, and financially we wanted to print something new rather than printing something that we just need to reprint. The Kickstarter expansions and stuff have allowed us to be able to afford to reprint the games. Like for instance, with this last Air Leader expansion Kickstarter, we're also going to have to reprint Hornet Leader because we're basically out of stock of it. But it's lending itself to allow both to happen simultaneously. Since we're already sending stuff to the printer and it's related content, now we're going to reprint it.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. The one follow-on question that I would ask is, how do you guys feel Kickstarter is at generating enthusiasm? Because I'll tell you, from somebody that's backed a bunch, I almost get more excited about pressing pledge than I do when the day the game shows up.
Yeah, it's fun. It's people get really excited, and it's almost like in the most like nice way of when you see people give their money to Kickstarter for your project, you feel like a sense of like excitement, and you can like, you feel honored that this person felt that their $45 plus shipping is well worth to spend now for a product that I am making or I've just finished making and they won't see for another couple of months. It's like having somebody come up to you and say, I love your game, I love your product, I just can't wait to get more of it. It's just a humbling feeling.
Yeah, it definitely, I think Kickstarter really does incite enthusiasm, because you guys are commenting in the Kickstarter saying, oh, I can't wait for this, and what about that, and how about this? And you get to show us your enthusiasm by physically pledging for it and saying, I'm willing to give you $100 right now for something I won't see for 4 to 6 months. And that's just how Kickstarter works. But I know every time we launch a Kickstarter, this is just like normal at this point, we hit launch now and we share the links around, and then we leave it open on one of our computers in the office. And all day, you just, especially that first day, you just watch the number go up, and it's I think it's just as exciting for us as for the backers of like, oh yeah, it's actually doing well, and they actually want it. And because you never really know, a couple posts on Facebook doesn't translate to tens of thousands of dollars. So once you actually put the Kickstarter out there, it's like, yay.
And then it's fun. We go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We then wake up in the morning and we say, Europe woke up.
And refreshed it. Oh, yay.
Yeah.
We need more stretch goals now. Hurry.
Yeah.
That's been the problem with you times. Like, we're out of stretch goals. Come on.
But something I was thinking of is, seeing as Chuck's in the chat, do you want to
talk about our next Kickstarter?
Yeah, do you want to talk about Zero Leader?
So I would love to give Chuck a chance, but I do want to get to one question we had first. So Chuck, this is your moment to get on deck, hit the green room, get refreshed. If you have to do any powdering. We have from Brandon M. Brandon M asks, have you done or would you consider doing a game on a convoy escort ship? Thinking of the HMS Bramble from the Cruel Sea, but could be a very wide variety of ships, whatever you think there's a market for.
The answer always is yes. I know very little about that. So if somebody were to come to me and say, I want to make a game on this, I think this would be great, let's do this, then I would say, come to me with some research and just some general ideas you have on notes, and we'll get talking about it.
Yeah, I think that lends itself to explaining, like, as a company, we've changed a lot in the last couple of years. Before, basically everything we were making was in-house, and so we were only creating like what actually interested us or was extremely popular in the community. But now, because we've been working with so many outside designers, our answer a lot of the time is yes, anything can be a game, just either we can work on it or we need to find someone who can. And so yes, we can definitely do convoy escort ships. We have a huge list of like, these are all really great ideas, and here's some facts about it and how we could start it. And then it just comes down to interest plus time and energy being put into it.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, Chuck, hopefully you've gotten some time to get ready, and no pressure, but I know David Thompson's also in the chat. So if we start talking about new stuff coming up, David, and you get pinged, I can read off. Oh, Chuck tells me I need to do a little bit more tap dancing. So I will tell you guys a little bit about what Chuck's working on, because this basically made my day. Again, he came up on the internet about it in the open. Presumably, we've been talking with you guys longer than that. I think 3 or 4 months ago, with the announcement that he was doing a companion piece to the existing Corsair Leader. Corsair Leader following the Vought F4U Corsair and similar systems that were used largely by naval aviation in the Pacific theater of World War II. And Chuck actually looked at this from the other perspective and said, well, wait, who are they flying against? Why are they flying against them? How did we get here? And Chuck has come up with Zero Leader. Chuck, are you up on mic?
I think he said not ready.
Not, but yeah, I'll give some general information about it until he pops on.
Until he jumps in.
Sure.
What I'm most excited about with Zero Leader is Chuck put in a huge amount of effort doing all the research for this. So little things like differences in airplanes, or how the Japanese actually fought and maintained and kept their aircraft running and all that, he has kept going. And so I really, really like that this game has a very historical feel to it. With things like the Japanese did not have great supply lines, did not have everything put together as much as the Americans. And so they had like aircraft graveyards And so we kind of showed that through the design, but it looked like Chuck popped up for a second.
Yeah, Chuck, give us a comms test, please.
I think his comm status is none.
He's still dark on comms. That's all right. Chuck, it looks right now, I don't know if this will help. It looks like you have video only, so your audio may be tied to your video. If you need to go up on video in order to talk, go for it.
Come on, Chuck.
Oh, this is always how it is, guys. You run distributed, nothing ever works perfectly. I'm amazed we've gone this far without it crashing or getting, solar flare interference or something. So this always happens.
But yeah, we've been.
He's coming in on the bottom again, I think.
Oh, is he there? Okay,
I think you're muted, Chuck. No, there we go.
Okay, is this better?
There he is.
Oh,
Hey, we got you live. You're up on your own time. Go for it.
Technology and I are not very good friends. just so you know.
Well,
No,
Chuck,
I use a large monitor for my computer, and it does not have voice
Right.
and video. So I'm trying to figure out a different way here. So you know what? The phone works great. So hello, guys. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
doing
Excellent.
terrific, Chuck.
Did everybody wish you two a happy anniversary, by the way?
Not yet.
No.
Well,
Our anniversary is on Monday.
yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
So tell us about Zero.
Well, before you do that, Chuck, could you introduce yourself for who you are? We're recording this and we'll have this elsewhere. So it'd be great if you could tell the audience who you are and what you're up to.
Excellent. My name is Chuck Siegert. I live in Wisconsin. I met Sarah and Kevin through Corsair Leader, through the Corsair Leader Kickstarter. I know you were talking about Kickstarter earlier. I met them through that Kickstarter, and they're pretty amazing people. And got to join them for their wedding a year ago. And the rest, as they say, is history. Talking to some friends and whatever, I just made the offer to Kevin and Sarah. I said, I'd be interested in doing something looking at Corsair Leader from the Japanese side. And all of a sudden, here I am.
Terrific. Well, so if you had to describe Zero Leader in 30 seconds to somebody, what would you say? And by the way, I'm not actually going to time you. So if you want to go on for 30 minutes, we'll pretend it was 30 seconds.
Take a deep
I'm
breath.
with Kevin laughing in the background because he knows that isn't going to happen. If I had to describe Zero Leader in 30 seconds, I would say it is the Pacific Air War, World War II, from the Japanese point of view. It basically takes a lot of the mechanics of Corsair Leader and applies them from a Japanese side. And what I went to great lengths to do with Kevin's help is we work together to make it feel like you're Japanese. In other words, you don't have all the resources that people have in Corsair Leader. You're limited in maintenance. I added maneuver and robustness to the aircraft in order to give a little bit of a difference. It's different if you're flying a Zero versus a Frank or an Oscar or a Betty. It should feel different, and it does. So that was one of the big things I did. And I added, like I said, I mentioned maintenance and that type of thing, just to try and give a real feel for lack of better words, the struggle of being a Japanese squadron commander versus being an American commander.
Well, I remember I talked to you about this earlier in the week, and one of the things you brought up is the Home Island Defense Campaign has the Japanese going after B-29s.
Correct.
I know from my own research, that was incredibly painful for them. High altitude intercepts were really tough. Would you mind talking about how you have that modeled in the game?
Well, basically, because Corsair Leader is not like a deep simulation type gaming, so the way I modeled it is normally when you're destroying a bandit or whatever, or a bomber, it's one hit and it's gone. But in this case, I made the B-29s 2 hits. So the B-29s are twice as difficult to knock down as any other bomber in the game. So it was a simplified way to try and reflect the difficulty the Japanese had going after these things.
Speaking for myself, I know how many of my Corsair Leader missions were determined by I finally got the kill on the last turn before I had to leave. So I could imagine having to get that second hit is pretty stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's I've enjoyed it very, very much. I find it an add-on to just the difficulty factor. But really the more difficult factor to it is trying to get past the P-51 Mustangs that are around there escorting them.
Definitely challenging as well. So when I talked with Chuck earlier in the week, I'd bugged him about, hey, how many aircraft do you have in this? And the short answer is all of them.
Yeah.
He managed to put in just about everything that the Japanese or the U.S. flew as main stuff. So
Yeah.
if I could ask, where did you start for the research on this? Because it's a lot of aircraft.
Well, honestly, I have been an airplane and specifically World War II airplane fanatic since I was probably 13, 14 years old. And believe me, that's a long time ago. So I've been studying and paying attention to all these things. But I used to tease Kevin and Sarah about, yeah, you don't have a job. You design games. You work on games and you play with games and everything else. Yeah. Well, Kevin taught me real easily or real quickly how wrong I am with that conversation. So I really had to start digging even deeper to find out all the differences. But I had a pretty good head start from 40 some years of going to air shows and studying these airplanes and reading the books and doing all that kind of stuff. So I had a pretty good head start, but it was still a lot of work.
Yeah, it was, so I'll let you know, it was fun talking with Chuck throughout this whole process of, he would say, there's this really cool idea that I really, really want. And I would say, let's see how we can make it happen. And then it was basically us sitting on the phone for
hours.
Quite a long time.
Sarah.
And we'd go back and forth about what's the best way of implementing this idea so that way it fits within the whole system, it doesn't feel tacked on, and it's not a headache for the player to deal with. And it would just be hours on the phone, and we eventually had to limit it of like, once a week, because we were just talking a lot, and it was never fluff stuff. It was like, how do we make the game better?
It was necessary, but it was like a lot of conversation. Yeah. I was like, Kevin, we have other work.
Yeah, it didn't seem like hours, just FYI.
Yeah, Sarah would, come in and say, hey, lunch is ready. And I said, we just ate breakfast. And she said, we did not just eat breakfast.
Or we need to go to the warehouse and just pack out, or we need to do our other parts for a job.
But yeah, it's
on my side, my wife would just stomp on the floor of the ceiling up above. She wouldn't come down and tell me, but I'd hear boom, boom. And okay, I think I got to cut this part.
Yeah, but it's one of the most fun parts of game design is seeing a subject or a real world thing and then seeing how do I make this into a system that is fun. And that's like one of the great marks of someone who's fun to work with is it's fun to talk with them about that and figure out how to make that happen. So yeah, all those hours on the phone with you, Chuck, and I'd say we have ourselves a pretty fun game that you've made.
I'm very, very excited. I mean, I've enjoyed playing it. I might be biased, but it's probably my favorite DVG game, even though it's not a DVG game quite yet. But it's it's very, very enjoyable because again, it has that little extra. It has that not so easy. You can't send out 9 aircraft because you don't have enough maintenance guys to make 9 aircraft ready for flight tomorrow. So you have to decide: do I send 5 guys that I can fix all of those planes, or do I send 9 guys knowing tomorrow I'm going to be short some airplanes? And I love that extra decision level that has consequence. It's not just, well, do I shoot out of this gun or that gun? It's an extra level of information that I think makes the game just a little bit more fun.
Absolutely. The hallmark of a good designer is a way to put operational stress into a tactical game, amongst other things, because it's a way you can show this is something they have to deal with without making everybody fill out 50 spreadsheets. So just the idea of you get less stuff, that appeals to me, because you're absolutely right. That was something the Japanese struggled with. But before I go too far down the history hole, we got a great question from Alex Buttery in chat. He wanted to know, Chuck, would you be able to talk about the plan to bridge Zero Leader and Corsair Leader to play them together?
No, I don't have any plans to do that. That's actually what I've been working on. I just sent an update to Kevin yesterday. But the plan is to make it so that 2 people can get together and they're both playing solitaire games, but they're playing against each other, if that makes any sense. So one player will be Corsair Leader, the other guy is Zero Leader, and you pick the same campaign, you pick the same length of the campaign, but that's where it starts to diverge. And let's say the Corsair Leader, that player's going first. So he will pick his target and everything, attack it, get all that stuff, get all ready to attack. The defender, the guy playing zero leader, now he chooses which ones of his actual pilots he wants to use as combat air patrol and have them out there as bandits to fight the oncoming Americans. So you're actually going to have more of a dogfight with me flying my zero against Kevin flying his Corsair. You know, that's actually going to be a bit of a dogfight. And when the Corsair leader, if he destroys a target, or if the zero leader player destroys a target, that is going to have real world effects on the opposing player later in the game. So it's just like you get to play your solitaire game, but you have a live opponent and you have real world effects if that opponent gets through.
Well, that sounds terrific. So if we could, so we're fixing to run out of time here. We've been talking for quite a while, and much like these conversations, doesn't feel like it. So that's a good thing. But I would kick it back to the Versens to ask, first of all, for that, thanks for speaking, Chuck, and we may call on you again depending on what happens out of this. But I want to kick it back to the Versens to give you guys some remaining time. What games do you want us to know about that's coming up next? What should we be aware of in the next few months?
Yeah, I guess the easiest one to talk about is Zero Leader. We're planning on kickstarting that around the second week of August, depending on how things go over the next week. It might be the third week, we'll see. So that's what's immediately next. The plan after that is more fluid, but probably Warfighter Fantasy.
Yeah.
We're really, really hoping to get it on Kickstarter in September.
Yeah.
That's the plan right now. And then after that, we're looking at David Thompson, Soldiers and Postmen's Uniform, around October, November. And then we have a few other outside design games that we're going to plug in, as we can. I think we're hoping for Spruance later, right?
Yeah, Dean Brown's Spruance later.
In here too.
Yeah.
That's also probably going to come fall to winter, we're hoping for. And yeah, I think that's going to be the rest of our year, basically.
Yeah, there's future plans for a Warfighter near future of like 2030s, 2040s-ish. So we have like robotics and nanotech, but not like quite, we're not Warhammer 40K in it or anything. It's, near future. We have plans for Warfighter Vietnam.
Yeah, that's going to be our next big project that we're working on as a team in-house.
Yeah. And then we also have Sopwith Fokker Leader through Ian Martin. He's
Camel Leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's
Ian
excited
Martin.
about that. And then we also have a Abrams Leader through James Garton. And he's working on that as well. So we have a lot of things in the pipeline. Like 3 months ago, a bunch of designers, started posting on Facebook or reach out to me and said, sure, let's do this. And so like 6 to 9 months after that is when we're just going to have a whole bunch of games.
Yeah, I think we have 5 or 6 different leader games in the works beyond Zero Leader, which is actually like ready to kickstart. That will all come up over hopefully the next year. Like we kind of talked about earlier in the chat with outside designers, it's up to them, their time frame, and if they actually get this content done, great, we throw it up on Kickstarter. If they seem to peter out, then we talk with them and see if it's something they want to continue working on. So hopefully all of those things we've talked about will be coming out soon.
Yeah.
But Zero Leader, Fantasy, Soldiers and Postmen Uniform are like the next big things.
Oh, we got one quick last question from Pete Oakley. Asked about using percentage dice instead of D10, D6. What do you guys think?
We've always used D10, D6. I'd be into it, seeing percentage dice. We tend not to be that crunchy with our numbers, where we need to delineate by 100 as opposed to just by 10. But if there was a game in the future where that level of crunch was required, possibly even future Warfighter, kind of like how we have body parts and locations for a D20, we may eventually have like specific wound locations on a D100. So yeah, I could totally see something like that in the future.
I mean, worst comes to worst, you could make 100 different types of vegetables and roll on that for dinner. So.
There you go.
100 canned vegetables. Yeah.
Okay, so we've definitely hit the point to wrap it up. Definitely thank you, everybody. I want to hand it back over for Kevin and Sarah. If there's anything else you guys want to say, anybody else in the audience you want to highlight?
I think the two Hollies is Holly Verssen,
Yeah.
I believe. I'm guessing a phone and a computer got all mixed up.
Yeah.
We also have a friend, Mika, on the chat.
Yeah.
And yeah,
We got Dean Brown,
David
I
and
believe,
Dean.
with the Dean B.
Yeah,
We got our David Thompson,
and
and
wrestling your fan.
yeah, a couple other names I recognize from Warfighter comments and mentions that may be in future battle packs.
Yeah, now that you know, just email us and you can design your own game.
Yeah, if you think we've been slacking on a particular battle, you let us know and you can make it. Yeah. But yeah, this was really fun. It was fun seeing people come out and see us and just kind of talking and hanging out for an hour. It was fun.
It's fast.
Yeah, real fast.
Well, absolutely. So once again, this was brought to you by NoDiceNoGlory.com and the Historical Miniature Gaming Society, HGMS, and we'd like to thank Kevin and Sarah for their time today. The video from the session can be found on YouTube and also on NoDiceNoGlory.com. If the Versens want to host it, we can give you guys the link, and it'll be up on their social media presence based on the look on Sarah's face. So you guys will be able to find it there shortly. Feel free to visit the NoDiceNoGlory.com message boards to continue the conversation, and I would always encourage you to join DVG's Facebook groups. They're very active. Thank you all very much for joining us for this session.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I think.
Yep, Mitch, you can cut the recording.